Don't miss Western Canada's largest business-to-business platform connecting the holistic building industry. Gain access to over 250 industry leaders showcasing new technologies and innovations at BuildX Vancouver. Connect with agriculture, engineering, construction, home builder renovators, and property management professionals. Learn from 150 plus industry experts through over 80 seminars and panel discussions on what's happening across Western Canada's built environment. Select seminars, keynotes, and workshops are accredited for continuing education credits. BuildX Vancouver takes place on Wednesday, February 15th and Thursday, February 16th at the Vancouver Convention Centre. Tickets are available at buildxvancouver.com. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey, and with me today I have
Kris Lengieza, the Vice President of Global Partnerships and Alliances at Procore.
Okay, and Kris, the last time we talked was 2019, 2018, something like that. It was an in-person event in Vancouver, and that's quite some time between then and now. A lot has happened, some of it quite obvious to the entire world, and some of it not so obvious in terms of construction and technology. Let's start with the obvious stuff. How did the pandemic for Procore and otherwise, just in a general technology sense, change what we do in the industry?
Yeah. I think the interesting thing about the pandemic is there's a lot of hard things about the pandemic, but there was also some really great things that came out of the pandemic as far as driving people to change the way that they did business, especially in construction. A business that was very traditionally used to having everybody in person all the time, having to be in a job site trailer, having everything physically be there, was kind of forced into a world where, hey, we needed to do things where people didn't necessarily have to be together because they couldn't. And so what it forced folks to do is to really think about, hey, how do I have access to all the information I need without actually being in the office or in the trailer? Or how do I have a meeting with the architect who can't fly to get here because there's no travel right now? And that drove a lot of digital adoption in our industry. So folks were looking at technology as a way to bridge that gap, to continue their business and to make sure that they could deliver on their projects, but without necessarily having to do it the old traditional way. And it took away a lot of what I would say maybe are excuses or reasons why they couldn't use technologies like these, because they were forced to have to use them. So we saw a pretty heavy ramp of digital adoption of technology and tools, Procore being one of those things. Folks were really looking for better ways to have visibility across all their projects without being there, capture a lot more information from the job site to make sure that it could get back to either the home office or the back office. And so that was a really kind of a time for people to leverage it to make sure that they could continue to run their day-to-day business.
Now, this is the pandemic forced their hand, basically, or forced the entire industry's hand, not just them. Yep. But these were, some of these anyway, were trends that were happening to begin with, and it's just kind of accelerated it, sort of poured some gas on the fire, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely was an accelerant. So those who were already down this path a little bit probably did a lot more than maybe they were planning, and those who had not done anything were kind of in some cases left scrambling to figure out what they were going to do. So I think the advantage went to those who already had a digital strategy and they just needed to adopt maybe some new things. Those who were not already on the bandwagon were now definitely looking for, hey, how do I actually implement technology? Who's going to run that inside of my company? And there's a very interesting transition of leadership in a lot of companies, especially in construction, because of the aging out of senior people, whether it's in the field or in the office. And so in some cases, it was a great opportunity for those who were much more attuned to technology, much more comfortable with technology, to step up and play a big role in transforming their business.
And what are some of the trends in that sort of that time period, like let's say 2019 to 2022, that didn't get as much attention, but were equally or somewhat as important in terms of changing how construction does things, technology-wise?
Yeah, I think a couple of really good ones were the ability to either capture or visualize the job site without necessarily being there. So we saw a lot of what I would call site capture, reality capture, whether it be photos, drones, laser scanning, and then how do people actually review that? So the implementation of more virtual reality, augmented reality, where they can actually kind of walk through the site without actually stepping foot on it. And things like this were traditionally thought of as that's not really possible. The bank inspector is always going to want to come here. The building inspector is always going to want to come and see these things, because they couldn't. We were forced to find new ways. So we saw a lot of adoption of those. We also saw a lot of adoption of just like planning tools. Logistics and materials are a big challenge and continue to still be a big challenge for us in 2023 on like, how can we get them? Where are they? Do we have visibility? And so this heightened our awareness of the need to manage labor and materials and how they were going to get to the job site, where they were in the supply chain, and how that was going to impact our project.
Well, that's another thing. Supply chains kind of overtook the pandemic as the number one concern, or one of the biggest anyway. So maybe you could address in 2023 and maybe back in 2022 when the problem reared its head. How do we work around this sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is I would boil it down to visibility, right? Traditionally, construction has not had great visibility into the supply chain, meaning that if they order something, they order it, they put the order in, and then until it shows up on the job site, there's not a lot of visibility into what's happening behind the scenes. So we've seen new technologies evolve here. We've seen a lot of interest in connecting the supply chain. So from the general contractor to the specialty contractor to their supplier and then down to the manufacturer, and understanding, let's say for a big piece of electrical equipment, hey, we know that it got approved to order. We know that it got ordered. Where is it in the manufacturing process? Okay, now it's in the QA/QC process. When's it going to get shipped? When's it going to be here? And how does that fit into my schedule? So we've definitely seen some new players there, and we've seen a lot of interest in adopting and even tools like Procore to make sure that you have visibility into where those things are. So people use our tools to track and measure where those things are in the supply chain, and a lot of times integrated with other partners who have a higher level of detail inside of that space as well. And the other thing that comes out of that is not just about where are the things for your project, but what are the trends we're seeing of the things that are going to take longer? For example, do we have an understanding of the common lead time for electrical equipment, right? Things like that right now are running, 9 to 12 months before you can get them. So if you have a 1-year project and you're about to kick off and you haven't even ordered your switchgear, you could be in trouble. So that planning aspect of understanding the timelines of how long it's going to take to get things is really important. And so being able to look at historical data. So because we've been tracking these things on other projects, we know how long it took to get them, and/or we've seen a lot of the industry kind of band together in ways to provide information and data on pricing and/or the availability of materials so that folks can be well prepared to run their projects.
Okay, and now that we're firmly into 2023, what do you see as sort of the new and ongoing trends? I know for one thing, everything costs more, and due to inflation and interest rates and everything else, so that's probably part of it. But what else is coming in 2023 for the industry?
Yeah, I still think that one of the biggest challenges that we have in the industry into 2023 is labor, right? One, costing more, but also availability. There's just not enough folks to do all the work that we have, right? And so a lot of investment going into how do we make sure that we have the right people? How do we make sure that we are training them appropriately? How do we make sure that we can get them on the projects that they need to? So whether that's things like workforce planning and making sure, hey, I have these people, are they going to the right projects? Or it's investing in early stages of their careers, i.e. getting people into the local trades so that we can have that backfill. I think it's around 22% or something like that of the industry's field personnel are going to retire by 2028. And so, we've got to backfill those folks. And so the interesting part is if you go to young people in high school today, they don't necessarily have the rosiest picture of going into construction industry, right? Because they think of their grandpa's construction industry. But there's a lot of new things and really fun and interesting and challenging things that our industry and new roles that are developing. So we're investing heavily, and I know many others are as well, in trying to recruit into the industry so that we can manage that. So labor shortage and being able to manage that labor, definitely a really big one. We're still seeing the continuation of a lot of investment of things like AR, VR to tie into that reality and site capture. And I think one other really big trend that we've seen, and this might be the evolution of where people have invested in their digitalization, is a lot more into the financials, right? A lot more of tying financials from the field to the office. Traditionally, that's been a relationship that might have friction of those who are running the project out in the field to those who are keeping the books in the office. And we want to connect those folks a lot better. And I think people are understanding that, hey, like there's a lot of business happening right now. There's a lot of work. If you don't keep a close eye on your financials, things can get out of hand. And so people are investing and make sure that they have really strong process, that they have really good data that's shared across their organization so that they can optimize the way that they run their business and make sure that they're being profitable, right? And continuing to grow the way that they can do that as a business.
Finally, in terms of blue sky, maybe this is not 2023, maybe it's a little later than that, but I just saw Boston Dynamics came out with yet another new robot that does backflips, and this is actually on a simulated construction site.
Yeah.
You probably saw the same video I did. So, I mean, obviously that's not happening next year, but what is some of the stuff people should keep an eye on that maybe isn't happening quite yet, but 5 years out, you might be a thing you might be using or in the process of looking at it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some really interesting things happening, obviously, around artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the applications into construction, right? We've probably all seen the examples of things like ChatGPT and the answers you can get just by asking questions about what's out there, right? So applications like that are going to come into the construction industry as well. And the way that it's going to impact us, and I've always said this, it's just going to make the information that you should already have just a lot more accessible and easier to get for you. And so really excited with what we're seeing as people investing in that type of space, automating tasks that are just redundant and very, very timely, that can be done by a machine much, much faster and don't add a lot of value. Great example of that is things like counting in the estimating process. So auto takeoff and being able to look at a set of plans and know how much concrete's in it just because the machine can recognize the outline of the slabs and the columns and kind of do those things. So those things are maybe not as 5 years away, maybe like 2 to 3 years away. We're also seeing a lot of evolution in the interest in the development of technology around climate tech, clean energy, sustainability for the job site. So tracking the impact that we're having on both the environmental, but also the social side of how projects are built. So that's a really interesting one where owners and the industry, and I think everyone in general is very interested in building a better environment and a better future for the next generation. And so we're seeing a lot of technology evolve, whether it's just tracking what we're doing on the job site or improving it with new forms of concrete that are actually capture carbon and interesting materials like that are being incorporated into projects. And a lot of that is possible because of the evolution that we're seeing in the way that projects are delivered and moving from more of a design bid build mentality to more of an integrated project delivery, where you're bringing on the contractors, the designers, the owners, all as one team and coming up with the best solution together. And that's affording us the opportunity to build more sustainably, to prepare ourselves to track the impact that we're having on the environment and track the impact that we're having on the area around where we're building, which I think is a really positive change for our industry.
Okay, thanks for joining us today, Kris.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.